The call came in at 2:47 in the morning, and by the time the trauma bay doors burst open at CFB Petawawa's medical center, everyone on shift already knew it was bad. The gurney came through fast, 2 paramedics leaning hard into it, a third holding a bag valve mask over the face of a man who looked like he had been pulled out of a river and then put through a wall. His name, according to the dog tag they'd already cut free and handed to triage, was Master Corporal Shane Kowalczyk, Joint Task Force 2, age 31, blood type A positive. The rest of the tag said things that most people in that building did not have clearance to read. The attending physician on call, Dr. Photo, met the gurney at the door. He was good at his job. Steady hands, clear voice, 15 years in emergency trauma. He took one look at the readouts and said what everyone in the room was already thinking. This doesn't make sense. The vitals were wrong in a way that had no clean explanation. Heart rate, 19 beats per minute. Respiratory rate, 4 breaths per minute. Core temperature, 34.1 Celsius. Blood pressure, 68/40. And yet the man on the gurney was not in cardiac arrest. His brain activity, per the portable monitor the paramedics had strapped on en route, was present. Reduced, but present. He was not unconscious in any conventional sense. He was not in a coma caused by injury. There was no bleed, no swelling, no oxygen deprivation they could find. He had been found alone in a training facility on the north edge of the base, seated upright against a wall, unresponsive. No trauma, no substances in his system per the field kit. His weapon had been field stripped, cleaned, and reassembled beside him with the kind of precision that took a long time and a very steady mind. Whatever had happened to Shane Kowalczyk, it had not happened to him. It had happened inside him. Dr. Photo ordered the standard battery. He called the on-call neurologist. He called cardiology. He paged the base's senior flight surgeon, who arrived in 12 minutes looking irritated and then concerned, in that order. For the next 40 minutes, the best medical minds at CFB Petawawa stood around Shane Kowalczyk's bed and quietly failed to reach a consensus on what was wrong with him, let alone how to fix it. At 3:34 a.m., a nursing aide named Bridget Colhoun slipped into the trauma bay to replace a nearly empty saline bag. Nobody noticed her come in. Nobody ever noticed Bridget Colhoun come in. She was 28 years old, had been working at the medical center for 14 months, and had, in that time, established a reputation for being competent, quiet, and forgettable. She wore her brown hair pulled back with a plain elastic. She did not make small talk. She did not volunteer opinions. She showed up on time, did her work, and left. The senior nursing staff liked her well enough because she never caused problems. The physicians rarely registered her presence beyond the functions she performed. She replaced the saline bag. She checked the IV line. She was about to step back when she stopped. Her eyes moved to the cardiac monitor, then to the oxygen saturation reading, then, slowly, with an expression that would have meant nothing to anyone watching, to Shane Kowalczyk's left hand, which was resting flat on the blanket beside his hip. She stood very still for a moment. Then she leaned forward just slightly and looked at the hand again. The index finger had moved. A small movement, almost imperceptible, but it had moved in a pattern, 2 short, 1 long, 2 short. She straightened up. Her face gave nothing away. She finished her check, noted it in the chart with the same unhurried efficiency she applied to everything, and walked out of the bay. Dr. Photo found her 4 minutes later at the nursing station, writing up supply notes. Colhoun, you were just in with Kowalczyk? Yes, sir. Replace the saline. IV line is clear. Did you notice anything? She looked up at him. His left index finger was moving. Photo frowned. We've noted some minor motor activity. It's not considered purposeful. I think it might be, she said. There was a pause. Photo was not an unkind man, but he was tired and overextended and standing in front of a nursing aide who had been on staff for 14 months and had, to his knowledge, never once offered a clinical opinion. Based on what? He asked. Bridget set down her pen. The movement was patterned. 2 short, 1 long, 2 short. He did it at least 3 times while I was in there. That could be involuntary muscle response. It could be, she said, or it could be a tap code. The word landed differently than she had expected. Photo did not dismiss it immediately. He looked at her for a moment in a way that suggested he was recalibrating something. A tap code, he repeated. Sears training uses it, she said. Survival, evasion, resistance, escape. It's a prisoner of war communication system. 5x5 grid, letters mapped to taps. 2 short, 1 long, 2 short. That's the pattern for the letter R. If he's running the code, he might be trying to communicate something. Or he might be running it on a loop because his mind is locked into a protocol he trained to activate under extreme duress. Photo stared at her. How do you know about Sear tap codes? Bridget Colquhoun picked up her pen again. I took a course, she said. She had not taken a course. What she had done, between the ages of 22 and 26, was serve as a Royal Canadian Medical Service officer attached to special operations units operating in theaters that, technically speaking, she was still not at liberty to discuss. She had been a trauma physician's assistant in conditions where the supply chain for medical equipment sometimes consisted of whatever could be stripped from a hostile vehicle and repurposed in the dark. She had treated men and women who came back from missions in states that no textbook in any Canadian medical school had prepared her for. She had learned tap code not from a course but from a JTF2 operator named Torres, who had spent 11 days in a hole in the ground in a country she was not going to name, and who had tapped out his unit identifier on the dirt floor of that hole every 4 hours as a way of staying human. She had learned it from him because he had taught her, one evening, sitting outside a forward operating base with 2 cups of terrible coffee because he said everyone who worked with his people should know it. Just in case. She had left the service at 26 for reasons that were partly medical, partly personal, and partly classified. She had come back to Canada, finished her registered nursing credentials, and taken a quiet job at a base medical center in Petawawa, where nobody knew who she had been or what she had done, and where the most complicated thing she usually dealt with was a sprained ankle or a training-related concussion. She had not told anyone. She had not planned to. Dr. Photo went back into the trauma bay. He watched Shane Kowalczyk's hand for 6 minutes. During that time, the finger moved 4 more times. He came back out and told Bridget to follow him. If this is a tap code, he said in a lowered voice outside the bay door. What is he saying? I only caught 3 cycles before I left, she said. R, repeated, possibly the start of a word, possibly a loop. I'd need to be in there longer to map it. You can read it in real time? Yes. Photo rubbed the back of his neck. The base commander is going to want to be notified. His unit CO is already on his way in. There are protocols for JTF2 personnel that. I understand, she said, but if he's in a psychogenic shutdown, if his nervous system has entered a voluntary suppression state in response to a perceived threat, then he may be communicating because some part of his mind is still trying to reach someone. If that window closes, or if the shutdown deepens, we may not get it back. Photo looked at her for a long moment. What are you actually qualified to tell me about psychogenic coma? She held his gaze. Enough, she said. He let her in. She sat beside Shane Kowalczyk's bed and watched his hand for 22 minutes. She said nothing. She moved nothing. She simply watched and listened with her eyes, the way Torres had taught her, not looking for the letters but letting them come. After a while, a pattern assembled itself. Riverston. E repeated. 3 full cycles, then a pause, then again, Riverstone. She did not react immediately. She sat with it. She looked at Shane Kowalczyk's face, the flatness of it, the absolute stillness, the way he looked less like a sleeping man and more like a man who had decided at some deep and protected level of himself to be somewhere else entirely. She had seen this before, not often, but she had seen it. She stood up and went to find Photo. Riverstone, she said. He looked at her. What is that? I don't know yet, but he's repeating it with the same regularity and precision each cycle. It's not a fragment, it's the whole message. The unit CO arrived at 4:15 a.m. Lieutenant Colonel Marsh was a tall, angular man with the energy of someone who had been awake for 20 hours and was very unhappy about it. He came into the medical center and received the briefing from Photo with the tight attention of a man who was being told something he did not want to hear. When Photo got to the part about the tap code, Marsh's expression shifted. "Who identified the code?" he asked. Photo said, "One of our nursing aides." Marsh looked across the room to where Bridget was refilling a chart at the station. He looked at her for a moment in the particular way that senior military officers looked at people they were about to dismiss. Then he looked back at Photo. "I want to speak with her." Bridget was escorted into the small consultation room off the main corridor. Marsh was already seated. He did not offer her a seat. She sat anyway. "You identified a SEER tap code in a JTF2 operator's motor response," he said. "And you translated it." "Yes, how?" "Training," she said. "What training?" She looked at him levelly. "The kind I'm not at liberty to describe in detail, sir." Marsh studied her. "The message you recovered. Riverstone. Do you know what that means?" "No." "It's a mission identifier," he said, after a pause that felt like a decision. "It's classified at a level I'm not going to discuss with you here. What I can tell you is that if Kowalczyk is running that word on a loop, it means something specific about the psychological state he's locked himself into." He paused again. "It means he thinks the mission isn't over." The room was very quiet. Bridget said, "He's in resistance mode." Marsh looked at her sharply. "In SEER training," she said, "there's a phase where operators learn to maintain cover under extended psychological pressure. Part of that training includes the ability to suppress autonomic functions, heart rate, respiration, even core temperature, as a stress response. If something happened on the mission that his mind registered as capture or compromise, his system may have triggered the resistance protocol involuntarily. He's not unconscious. He's in a self-induced defensive state. He's protecting the mission." Marsh was quiet for a moment that felt very long. "And you know this how?" "Because," Bridget said, "I've seen it happen once before. And I know what brought that person back. What had brought Torres back, and she had not thought about Torres in 2 years, has worked deliberately not to think about Torres, was his unit identifier, not his name. Not a familiar voice or a familiar face. Those things were what anyone might use to reach a person. But Torres, in his hole in the ground, had built a wall around himself using everything human, everything personal. The only door left open was the one marked by the code, by the mission, by the thing he was still, at the very bottom of himself, trying to protect. She had been there when they brought him out. She had been the one who had looked at the officer beside her and said very quietly, "Tell him his call sign." And the officer had said it, and Torres had opened his eyes. She had never written that up in a report. She had told nobody. It had seemed at the time like something too fragile for documentation. "I need to know Kowalczyk's call sign," she said. Marsh leaned back. "That is not information I can share with a nursing aide." "Then we're going to watch him shut down completely," she said. She said it without heat, without drama, the same way she would have told him that the IV line needed replacing. "His respiratory rate has dropped 2 full points in the last hour. If this is a psychogenic suppression event, the body will eventually stop negotiating. He is not going to wake up because someone calls his name or plays him his favorite song. He is going to wake up when something reaches the part of him that is still operational. And the only thing still operational right now is the mission layer. His call sign is his authentication code. It's the one thing he's still listening for." Marsh looked at the table. He looked at his hands. He was a man who had spent his career making decisions that he would not be able to explain to anyone outside of a very small room, and this was, Bridget understood, one of those moments. "Ridgeback," he said, very quietly. She stood up. She went back into the trauma bay alone. She'd asked Photo to clear the room, and he had done it, with the particular expression of a man who had stopped understanding what was happening, but had decided to trust the person who did. She pulled the chair close to the bed. She leaned in, close enough that no one outside the room could have heard what she said, and she spoke quietly and directly into the silence. "Ridgeback," she said, "stand down. Mission is secure. You are clear." Nothing happened for 10 seconds. Then 20. Then Shane Kowalczyk's hand moved. Not the tap code this time. Just a slow uncurling of the fingers, like a man releasing something he had been holding for a very long time. His heart rate climbed to 38, then 51, then 64. His eyes did not open immediately. That took another 4 minutes. When they did, they were unfocused at first, looking at something that was not in the room. Then they found the ceiling. Then, slowly, they found her face. He looked at her for a long moment. "Who are you?" he asked. His voice was the voice of someone who had not spoken in a very long time, dry and far away. "Callsign," she said. "I'm your nurse." He kept looking at her. There was something in his expression that she recognized, not suspicion exactly, but the careful, calibrated assessment of a person who had spent years learning to read the small and significant difference between what people said and what they meant. "You knew the code," he said. "Yes, and the call sign. Yes." A pause. Outside, through the window in the bay door, she could see Photo and Marsh standing in the corridor watching. Neither of them moved. "How?" Shane said. She looked at him. "I took a course," she said. He held her gaze for another moment. And then, slowly, something changed in his face. The careful, guarded assessment giving way to something quieter. He did not smile, exactly. But the look he gave her was not the look of a man who believed her. And it was not the look of a man who was going to press the point. It was the look of a man who had just decided that some debts did not require full accounting. "Okay," he said. "Callsign." She stood up. She checked his IV line. She noted his vitals on the chart. The numbers now climbing steadily. The cardiac monitor drawing peaks where there had been almost nothing. And she did all of this with the same unhurried, practical attention she brought to everything. When she was done, she went to the door and signaled to Photo. She did not look back. She did not need to. In the corridor, Marsh was waiting. He watched her come through the door. He watched her for a moment with an expression she could not entirely read, somewhere between assessment and acknowledgement. "I'm going to need to ask you some questions," he said, "about your background, about what you know and how you know it." "I expected that," she said. "You understand that some of what you've done tonight may require a formal debrief." "I understand." He nodded. Then, after a moment, he said something she had not expected. "He's one of the best we have," he said. "Whatever you were, wherever you did it, thank you." Bridget Colquhoun looked down the corridor toward the trauma bay, where Shane Kowalczyk was being attended to by 2 nurses and a physician who were all deeply relieved, and none of whom knew what had actually happened in that room. "I just replaced a saline bag," she said, and she went back to the nursing station, and she sat down, and she picked up her pen, and she finished her supply notes. Nobody noticed her go. Nobody ever noticed Bridget Colquhoun go. That was exactly the way she liked it.